In a world ablaze with faith and fervor, the year 1095 ignited a grand perilous journey. Pope Urban II's clarion call resonated through Europe, stirring souls with pledges of salvation, land, and glory. Knights spurred by divine ardor and peasants driven by survival's stark demands directed their gazes eastward. Beneath glittering aspirations, however, lay a landscape of trials. Starvation's gnawing embrace, illness's silent march, and a battlefield punctuated by betrayal. The march east was not a tale of heroism or nobility, but of raw survival where allegiances blurred and loyalties fractured. This was the Crusaders' reality, a confluence of faith blood and a legacy etched in stone and bone. Imagine standing among Europe's teeming masses in the crisp November air of 1095. From Pope Urban II's lips cascaded words of divine mandate, a rallying cry for a holy war echoing from cathedrals to cottages. It is a saga of zeal, political maneuvering, and human folly born from one man's promise of eternal salvation to those who would bear the cross. What began under the overcast sky in Clermont would soon engulf every corner of medieval society, from powerful knights to weary peasants. Under Urban's charismatic summons lay a grand vision uniting a fragmented Christendom under a sacred standard, expelling Muslims from Jerusalem and incidentally centralizing papal power. His oration was a masterpiece of religious and political strategy, weaving a narrative where spiritual redemption and earthly ambition were inextricably linked. For knights, it was a divine summons to achieve glory and land. For peasants, a rare chance to escape serfdom, promising salvation and a fresh start. Yet as they prepared to depart, many were unaware of the vastness of the journey ahead. The enthusiastic response to Urban's appeal was immediate, but overwhelmingly chaotic. The notion of reclaiming Jerusalem captivated minds, but this fervor masked a widespread ignorance of the grueling path ahead. Noble lords, fueled by dreams of power and conquest, stood beside wide-eyed serfs, propelled by visions of heavenly reward. The intensity of faith obscured the logistical and ethical challenges, launching this pilgrimage of faith directly into a quagmire of chaos and conflict. Medieval Europe was a mosaic of feudal territories rife with disputes and desires, where the Church's call served not only as a spiritual directive, but also as a potential source of order in disarray. Urban II offered a new channel for Europe's simmering violence, presenting crusaders with a new adversary on whom to focus their martial skills, while the allure of distant lands whispered promises of untold wealth. Yet the reality of conflict in the East was anything but romantic. The crusade would be a journey through deserts and fortresses defended by formidable foes protecting their ancestral homes. Jerusalem held a mythical significance in Christian thought. More than just a city, it was paradise on earth, heaven's reflection. Both sacred duty and profound longing propelled Christians to reclaim it, casting themselves as pilgrims on a divine quest for redemption. Hopeful crusaders envisioned golden streets overlooking harsher truths. The journey through treacherous landscapes, political complexities, and deeply rooted cultures. Nevertheless, driven by tales of the miraculous, they pressed forward toward the spiritual, albeit perilous dreamscape. The cross became the Crusaders' emblem, transforming ordinary knights into Milites Christi Christ soldiers. The fusion of warfare and faith reshaped medieval identity, marking a shift from secular knighthood to sacred soldiery. The cross, sewn onto cloaks, symbolized commitment and divine protection. But this sacred dedication would soon falter under the harsh light of reality. Ideals of purity faced brutal tests, revealing the human frailties beneath the polished armor. The intertwined themes of religious fervor and political ambition formed a complex alliance powering the Crusade's momentum. While the Church aimed to extend its influence and reclaim holy lands, monarchs saw it as a strategic advantage, a path to wealth and power. This duality, divine mission and worldliness, created a potent yet volatile mix that drove the Crusaders forward, while sowing seeds for future discord and betrayal. As the movement gained traction, recruitment surged. Urban's compelling rhetoric, disseminated by tireless preachers, stirred visions of sainthood, martyrdom, and eternal reward. Yet this rapid assembly led to significant readiness issues. Many left ill-prepared, armed, more with zeal than with provisions or resilience to face the looming hazards. Their eagerness to depart left them vulnerable to the ravages of upcoming hardships, unforgiving terrain, unfamiliar cultures, and internal strife, all lying in wait long before they glimpsed Jerusalem's spires. In a surge of determination, spurred by clanging church bells and tearful farewells, the Crusaders finally set forth. Entire villages emptied as columns of men, women, and children wound through Europe's fields and forests, a vivid portrait frozen in history's annals. Swathed in this sea of humanity was a potent mix of fear, hope, and fellowship on a journey both transformative and perilous. The road ahead led them away from the comforts of home into the unknown, each step burdened with uncertainty and danger. Yet as they journeyed together, their fates intertwined by the colorful crosses sewn into their garments, they clung to the dream. A holy conquest that, though steeped in blood and shadowed by ambition, promised divine redemption bathed in eternity's light. Under a sky that seemed to promise more challenge than blessing, thousands set out answering Pope Urban II's call. Knights in armor walked alongside peasants clutching little more than hope and makeshift spears. Their gaze was fixed on the Holy Land, though many were more enticed by dreams of land and glory than any devout desire. They left behind the damp chill of familiar mornings, exchanging comfort for the unknown. Yet as their departure began to resemble exile, doubts crept in, whispering behind the faith they carried like a fragile shield. Each trudging step was marked by an unpreparedness that would soon become their most constant companion on this endless road of trials. Trails stretched ominously, forcing a harsh awakening. Logistics were a whisper compared to the roars of starvation and exhaustion. Idealism quickly crumbled beneath the weight of endless miles, where every step seemed to widen the dark chasm between dreams and reality. Hunger became a familiar companion, reducing men of bold beginnings to specters of desperation. As the skies offered no mercy and the earth only resistance, many saw their once full packs dwindle to nothing. Bread became a precious rarity, salted meat a cherished memory of a feast. Luxury was redefined, and sacrifice took the form of bare survival, reducing noble steeds to final meals and honorable men to scavengers. Across this agonizingly prolonged trek, sickness was an opportunistic specter thriving on fatigue. Disease did not wield sword or spear. It crept insidiously, transforming sturdy soldiers into incoherent shadows burning with fever. Such ailments ravaged crowded ranks with cruel glee, striking down the once strong who marched under shattered illusions. The stench of unwashed bodies mingled with despair, a bitter reminder of their plight they could not cleanse. Yet propelled by something half divine and half desperate, they pressed forward, redrawing the lines between camaraderie and fracture with each grueling step. Divisions became tangled as betrayal slunk beneath a thin veneer of shared mission. Hunger sowed distrust, turning close friends into weary beasts fighting over dwindling scraps. Ethnic loyalties curdled into suspicion, feeding tensions nearly as potent as any true battle would reveal. Promises of power and land whispered tales of temptation, hard for many to resist. Despite this, slivers of unity flickered in speeches by leaders whose voices were steeped in both desperation and conviction. Even as they slowly deviated from unwavering paths, some seeking sanctuary or sustenance, others swallowed by the march's shadows, their journey subjected them to the strange new world of Byzantium. Great Byzantine opulence shone both as a potential ally and a riddle. The Crusaders absorbed this sensory whirlwind with wide-eyed uncertainty. They wandered through bustling marketplaces, bursting with colors and smells hinting at allure and threat. Such encounters unfolded beneath a spiritual challenge echoing an eternal divine question. Was their faith strengthened by the call or diluted by the echo of reality? Many found answers in prayer, clinging to ritual as both balm and battleground, whispering to God amidst cries of anguish. For some, faith persisted as the purest test. For others, it cracked beneath pragmatic resignation. Leadership emerged from the chaos, often as a reluctant guide, leading the staggering masses to collective resolve. Yet beyond this physical realm, an uncharted cost loomed. The war waged within lingered in shadows imperceptible to the eye. The irreversible scars left by relentless warfare twisted onto souls that never sought the burdens of battle. From farmers to blacksmiths, they battled this unseen enemy. Laughter mingled with anguish in stolen moments between clashes. They mended humanity's worn fabric with rough patches of camaraderie and solemn kinship, embracing moments of uncommon tenderness amidst the cacophony of chaos. As their cohesion frayed, dictated by war's brutal demands and geography's divisions, Their path drew them deeper into an embrace with shadow. Their darkly lit revelation painted each exhausted face as both hero and villain. Beneath a canopy of stars offering silent judgment, they confronted their inner depths. Every campfire discussion turned melancholy, with the poetry of survival weaving tales of courage and frailty into narratives only encroaching darkness could permit. This new self-understanding forged by the drums of war imbued these travelers with a profound truth. Their conflict was not merely with an external enemy, but with the darkness inherent to humanity itself. Gradually, as their dusty roads faded behind them, they came to grasp the dual essence of their journey. Not just a conquest of land, but a tangled victory bearing the weight of both triumph and tragic introspection. At the outset of their journey, the Crusaders viewed Byzantines as crucial allies in their holy war. The Byzantine Empire, a bridge between Europe and Asia, offered a vital passage to the Holy Land. Yet interactions were fraught with tension and misunderstanding. Emperor Alexios Komnenos considered the Crusaders both a tool and a potential threat. He sought to reclaim lands from Muslim control, but feared the Crusaders might turn attack. Centuries of mistrust between Latin and Orthodox Christians cast a shadow over this precarious relationship, where alliances teetered on cultural and linguistic divides. The Crusaders approached their Byzantine allies with naive optimism, unprepared for the labyrinthine Byzantine politics. Upon reaching Constantinople, a world starkly different from their own greeted them, sophisticated and splendid, yet perplexingly Byzantine. Frustration grew from delays and distrust. Crusaders grudgingly swore oaths to Alexios, binding their ambitions to his territorial dreams. But mutual hostility simmered beneath the fragile cooperation. As they moved eastward, Byzantine support dwindled amidst miscommunication and conflicting agendas, setting the stage for betrayals shaping the Crusades' course. Not only did they face external challenges, but internal discord also festered. Among the knights, national tensions flared as nobles vied for status and spoils. Some saw themselves not only as soldiers of Christendom, but as future rulers carving fiefdoms from conquered lands. Figures like Bohemond of Taranto sought to expand his power, clashing with others like Raymond of Toulouse. The crusade was a convergence of ambitious forces, a chess game where strategic disagreements and personal vendettas fractured unity. Temporary truces were brokered out of necessity, often discarded when goals diverged, leading to isolation in battle and presenting opportunities for betrayal. Division splintered unity as Latins became spies and saboteurs, driven by personal ambition and distrust. Along their journey, the Crusaders' zeal sometimes manifested in horrific pogroms against Jewish communities across Europe. Driven by a skewed sense of divine mandate, Crusader militias ransacked Jewish quarters, fueled by fiery rhetoric. In 1096, the Rhineland witnessed such atrocities, displaying the cruel irony of seeking salvation abroad while enacting damnation at home. Jewish communities suddenly vulnerable faced massacres, forced conversions, and extortion. On the road to Jerusalem, many Jews encountered discrimination or death at the hands of their supposed liberators, highlighting a volatile mix of religious fervor and xenophobia fueling the crusade. As they marched, Crusaders encountered Eastern Christians who disrupted the simplistic Christian-Muslim dichotomy. Maronites, Armenians, and Syriac communities formed a complex mosaic of affiliations and practices. Sharing a common Christianity, theological dissent, and historical schisms meant these groups did not necessarily welcome the Latins. Flourishing under Muslim rule with negotiated space for worship and commerce, the Crusaders' conquest added layers to the complexity. They expected a warm embrace, but often met cautious, resentful receptions. Ideological differences bred mistrust. Practical concerns about disrupting peace with Muslim rulers drove wedges between them. In pursuit of converting foreign lands, a mix of religious conviction and coercive conversion emerged among the Crusaders. Beyond martial ambitions lay the impulse to spread Christianity, sometimes at sword point. Forced baptisms reflected the darker aspects of their holy war, where coercion blurred moral lines. Converts faced threats of violence regardless of genuine belief or fear-driven acceptance. While some leaders sought true conviction, the volatile mix of faith and force marked the spread of Christianity across contested lands, igniting resentment rather than trust. Amidst the clamor were women whose stories wove through the First Crusade. Chronicles hinted at their presence not as passive observers, but as participants shaping destinies from behind veils or atop horses. From noble ladies in armor to disguised pilgrims wielding swords, women ventured into the unknown for sanctity, survival, and security. Their endurance amidst sieges and feuds lent momentum to armies led by faith-driven men. Yet many tales relegated them to the periphery, history shadowing their roles, revealing a tapestry often overshadowed by male chronicles. Mercenaries also marched alongside pious knights, their motives driven not by celestial vision, but earthly gain. Soldiers of fortune, they marched not with religious fervor, but for coin. Their pragmatic presence complicated the Christian endeavor. Lacking the same commitment, some deserted or betrayed allies if profit beckoned. Yet their skills were undeniable, their presence necessary. They forged paths through contested lands, threading faith-laden quests with survival and self-interest. On the other side, Muslim perspectives captured varied responses to the Crusaders' advance within diverse faith communities, Shia, Sunni, Sufi. Some saw Crusaders as transient waves destined to retreat, while others met them with fierce resolve. Chronicles penned testimonies of lament, anger, and determination, crafting narratives seldom explored by Western pens. Jihads and crusades intersected like cataclysmic conversations, redefining medieval dynamics. While local sultans and emirs maneuvered alliances, the Muslim world was a dynamic entity, actors in an intricate drama far from a monolithic victim narrative. Within this collision of civilizations lay cross-cultural exchanges where strife met understanding. Knights marveled at Eastern rulers' intellectual pursuits. Mathematical, astronomical, and medicinal knowledge dazzled them. In Crusader camps, Western Christianity met Eastern insights, albeit often overshadowed by misconceptions or zeal. This blend of cultures facilitated unintended bridges resonating through succeeding centuries. Yet mutual curiosity coexisted with animosity, creating new pathways amidst war's devastation, forging legacies beyond hostile encounters. In the autumn of 1097, the Crusaders found themselves at the formidable gates of Antioch, a city that stood as both a dazzling jewel and an unyielding obstacle. Its thick stone walls and watchful towers loomed ominously over the weary travelers. Antioch was more than just another city to conquer. It was the gateway to the Holy Land, a strategic prize worth every ounce of struggle. Yet as they gazed upon its impressive defenses, initial enthusiasm gave way to the harsh reality of their situation. Supplies were dwindling and morale was beginning to flag. The siege began with vigor. With hands blistered from work, the Crusaders crafted siege weapons from whatever materials they could scavenge. Catapults hurled stones against the resistant walls, and ladders were constructed in a bid to surmount them. The defenders met these efforts with equal determination, sending arrows raining down from above and pouring boiling oil over any who dared approach too closely. The initial fervor of battle cries soon faded, replaced by a grim routine, as each day slipped into the next and the defenders held their ground. Weeks turned into months, and with them, gnawing hunger became a constant companion within the Crusader camp. What had once been ample provisions had dwindled to mere scraps, and desperation took root. Some whispered of forging raids against their kin for crumbs, while others began finding nourishment in the unthinkable, eating horses, rats, even leather. Yet amid such desperation, faith remained a stubborn light in the darkness. Many clung to the hope of divine intervention, rallying in prayer to seek favor in their struggle. It was a faith that at times kindled tensions between the pragmatic and the devout, but it also unified them around their shared goal, the capture of Antioch. Then came a chilling twist of fate. Reinforcements from within the city turned the siege back upon the Crusaders. The hunters became the hunted, and panic rippled through their ranks. Cut off from retreat and surrounded now on all sides, the Crusaders faced a new fearsome adversary, their own despair. Antioch's thick walls remained impenetrable, while outside the noose tightened ever more. Amidst this turmoil, faith again became the Crusaders' anchor. The camp buzzed with tales of visions and divine portents, a particularly electrifying one being the discovery of a holy lance buried beneath St. Peter's Cathedral. This tale whipped the weary soldiers into a frenzy of hope, a spiritual lifeline, promising not just religious significance, but a decisive shift in the siege's fortunes. Through either fate, divine will, or simple luck, fortune soon smiled upon the Crusaders. A betrayal within Antioch turned the tide. Bohemond of Taranto, ever a cunning figure, exploited this chance. orchestrating a secretive infiltration under the cloak of night. It was not the stuff grand tales are made of, but a gritty and shadowy operation that dismantled the city's defenses from within. Antioch, once an impregnable stronghold, was now at the mercy of those who once despaired over its walls. Victory was theirs, but it was a victory steeped in haunting shadows. Yet the spoils of Antioch offered little solace. Disease ran rampant through the city. Provisions were scarce, and the air hung heavy with the stench of death. The elation of conquest was tempered by a realization of what had been truly won. For all its strategic value, Antioch was a hollow prize, leaving them weary from attrition and loss. Beyond the immediate contest for survival, the fall of Antioch sent tremors across the entire region. Muslim leaders quickly recalibrated to the threat of these invaders. And among the Crusaders, the seeds of discord were sown. Bohemon's audacious claim to leadership stoked rivalries and distrust among the ranks. These rivalries foreshadowed more significant conflicts. For in their eastward march, the Crusaders needed to navigate an intricate web of alliances and enmities to survive in this unfamiliar land. With the capture of Antioch came the realization of the profound cost of their ambition. Blood, sanity, unity, they had sacrificed much, and yet their journey was far from over. Antioch was a mere step, a fleeting moment that laid bare both their desires and the stark challenges still ahead. It symbolized their fading idealism, a victory bought at a price measured not only in sacrifice, but in the heavier burden of conquest yet to come. In this tale of despair and determination, the siege of Antioch remains a resonant chapter of history. It speaks to the valor of knights, the power of belief, and the grittiness of resolve against daunting odds. Its legacy, etched in both triumph and tragedy, persists as a parable on the human spirit's tenacity, a timeless tale of how ambition and survival entwine amidst the relentless march of time and warfare. As the Crusaders approached Jerusalem, the blistering heat of the Levant sun bore down upon them, a stark reminder of the alien world they had ventured into. The barren, unforgiving landscape sprawled before them, punctuated occasionally by pockets of lush oases. For the weary and starving men, each step on this sacred yet cursed ground was a testament to their resolve and faith. Sunburned skin, festering wounds, and the hollowed eyes of those who had witnessed death too often marked their bodies. Driven by an unyielding religious fervor, their grueling march had turned into a pilgrimage of desperation and divine conviction. Hunger gnawed at them constantly, a relentless companion that drained their strength. Meager rations, often mere scraps of stale bread and rancid water, barely sustained them. The strongest-willed among them began to question the wisdom of their journey, whispering doubts about promises of salvation versus harsh survival realities. With desertion always a lurking threat, most had no choice but to press on, comforted only by nighttime campfire tales of the holy city. Envisioning Jerusalem as a land flowing with milk and honey kept their flickering hope alive amidst the oppressive wilderness. Months of relentless trials had forged the Crusaders into a formidable force. What began as a disorganized assembly of European warriors evolved into a cohesive unit, strengthened by adversity. Disease, skirmishes, and deprivation had reduced their numbers, leaving only the resilient a unit bound by shared suffering and religious fervor. Their journey tested their faith, stripping away the superfluous and fortifying their purpose with iron-willed determination. United by the vision of reclaiming the sacred city, they had transcended their disparate European identities to become a singular force propelled by belief. They embodied righteous fury and were harbingers of holy vengeance, resolute in their mission to capture Jerusalem regardless of the cost. Yet as they neared Jerusalem, they faced formidable opposition. Iftikhar al-Dawla, the Fatimid governor of the city, had been forewarned of their approach. The city's defenders, guarded by their own faith, fortified their defenses and stockpiled provisions ready to protect their holy land. The Crusaders were aware of this mounting threat. The surrounding regions buzzed with danger, an intricate chessboard of skirmishes and tenuous alliances. They knew that missteps could lead to catastrophic ambushes. Yet they pressed forward, a gamble hinged on strategy, luck, and divine favor. In these tense moments, their faith surfaced as a potent shield, equal parts battlement and balm. Religion sustained them through doubt and despair. Rituals and mass prayers invoked divine protection, reinforcing their conviction. Faith tempered their fears but required acceptance of the inevitable cost. Driven by belief in fulfilling divine judgment, any inclination toward mercy was buried beneath their spiritual duty. As instruments of holy wrath, they teetered on the brink of sanctified ferocity, their resolve either steeled or unraveled by their unwavering faith. The Crusader army, a fusion of cultures bound by shared purpose, advanced slowly, yet inexorably. Lords and peasants marched side by side, united by suffering and resolve. Battle scars underscored their trials together, and voices of leaders once unimagined in their resolve carried them forward. Despite countless losses, they remained bonded by an unshakable purpose, a cohesive mass driven by threads of faith duty and the promise of Jerusalem on the horizon. At last, their quest culminated as Jerusalem emerged on the horizon, a splendid citadel shimmering like a divine mirage. Decades of longing coalesced into raw emotion, their biblical vision transformed into tangible reality. Yet beneath this all lay a somber realization. Reaching the holy city promised reward, but also impending tribulation. Anticipation mixed with uncertainty hung in the air, tempered by determination. Here lay the culmination of vows etched in blood and spirit, a victory with consequences whispering ominously in its wake. The night before the siege, the Crusaders camped outside the city walls, hearts flickering between trepidation and resolve, minds stirred by the gravity of the impending day, contemplating the legacy to be carved from ambition. As they strategized around campfires, whispered conversations, blended conviction and unspoken worries. The flames cast secretive shadows over faces toughened by faith, a living tableau of humanity confronting obedience, disbelief, and truth. Unspoken communion formed as they prepared to reshape history or risk their fates dangling beyond reach. Their zeal belonged to destiny's guardians, defying their souls to fulfill a divinely appointed fate. As dawn approached, silence hung over the land, a profound contrast to the fury that awaited. The Crusaders assembled, warriors poised for baptism by fire, balancing on history's edge. Within that silence, their purpose resonated, shrouding them in an aura of destiny. Each individual stood ready to transform from hopeful pilgrim to executor of divine retribution. As light broke, Jerusalem lay before them, a gleaming prize of faith and fire. The long, bloody journey was over. Victory in sight, and the staggering cost of their mission became chillingly clear. Here was their sacred prize, shining with vibrant significance, their faith and fire woven into an epic narrative. The Crusaders' charge into history was complete, a testament to belief and sacrifice etched upon the storied stones, promising salvation at an unimaginable price. The Crusaders stood at the edge of their divine quest, gazing upon Jerusalem's imposing silhouette with weary eyes. They had traversed a grueling landscape, faced starvation, disease, and betrayal. Yet the sight of this ancient city ignited a spark of resolve within their battered ranks. Their journey was etched in the scars on their bodies, the emaciated frames barely strong enough to carry weapons. With the golden dome shining in defiance under the relentless sun, Jerusalem was more than a city. It was the heart of their holy mission. Before them rose the city's formidable wall stone sentinels, crafted over millennia to withstand precisely this moment. Inside, the defenders steeled themselves. Diverse as they were, Jews, Muslims, and Eastern Christians, they shared one goal: survival. The Crusaders, fueled by faith and desperation, knew this wasn't merely about victory. Supplies dwindled and the climate seemed to conspire against them, casting an uneasy anticipation over their siege camp. Plans were meticulously laid out for what lay ahead. Catapults, siege towers, and ladders would be their instruments of fate. Constructing siege engines was a dangerous task under the vigilant gaze of Jerusalem's defenders. Wood was scarce and iron even more so. Yet necessity thrived in adversity. Engineers and soldiers toiled under the scorching sun, hands raw and bloodied. The defenders, meanwhile, launched arrows and stones, hoping to thwart the relentless builders. Despite sporadic raids designed to set their towers aflame, the Crusaders persevered with grit and unyielding determination. Each piece of equipment was more than a weapon. It was a beacon of their faith's determination, an oversized testament to survival over defeat. Inside the city, the defenders fought as one against the impending siege, holding on to a history intertwined with every stone and street. Leaders within the walls grappled with the monstrous task of unity amidst fear. They knew the Crusaders were not mere men, but the embodiment of an idea propelled by divine mandate, a tidal wave threatening everything that lay in its path. Yet even as stones and arrows rained upon the attackers, every act of defiance reminded them they fought for something greater than themselves. At the first light of dawn, the Crusaders launched their assault, a ferocious dance of desperation and zeal that set the stage for Jerusalem's fall. Under the shadow of siege towers, ladders clattered against the battlements as warriors surged forward, hearts pounding with fervor. The air shattered with chaos and the clangor of battle. Each moment an eruption of raw survival instincts. Sweat, blood, and tears mingled in the dust-choked air, a sensory overload that marked the very spectacle of medieval warfare. The defenders, barely holding on, fought valiantly, their resolve digging in fiercely. Yet the sheer force of the Crusaders proved unrelenting, and eventually the northern wall surrendered, opening the floodgates to what would become a human deluge. The array of violence was apocalyptic, flames licking the stones as soldiers pushed deeper into Jerusalem's heart. Streets became rivers of anguish and panic, each footfall resonating with the screams of the innocent caught in the tumult. Here the Crusaders' righteous fury was meted out indiscriminately, transforming victory into an unholy rite consecrated by chaos. As the turmoil began to fade, an eerie silence descended over the city, the profound quiet of the aftermath. Jerusalem, once vibrant, now lay under a shroud imbued with grief and death. Crusaders, weary architects of conquest, wandered among the ruins, subdued by a paradoxical blend of triumph and horror. In that silence lay a space for introspection, and within each soul, a reckoning brewed, a pondering of whether their actions aligned with the divine intent. Chroniclers of the era, such as Fulcher of Chartres and Raymond of Aguilera, captured stark depictions of the siege narratives etched in solemn testimony. Their words breathed life into scenes of terrifying fervor. Yet they also questioned the balance of divinity and destruction. In their manuscripts, the juxtaposition of triumph and tragedy lingered, a reflection upon the human condition, trapped within the constraints of divine war. Here, where the sacred entwined with the profane, the Crusaders found themselves amidst the ruins of sanctity. The holy city stood both consecrated and desecrated, its sacred relics transformed into trophies of victory. Within this discord, questions of faith arose. Could salvation's tide permit such a deluge of violence? As twilight approached conquest's cruel edge, the Crusaders seemed touched by a haunting echo. Victory entwined with the cacophony of mortality. Jerusalem's fall was more than an ordeal conquered. It left behind an indelible mark on the annals of faith and historical narrative. For those who traded sword thrust for prayer, understanding was now intertwined with the legacy created and the silence that stretched into infinity. As the Crusaders knelt in their own divided solace, they understood one profound truth. Jerusalem had been won, but at the cost of something immeasurable, a sacred echo haunting the landscape of both soul and sand. The dust of battle finally settled over Jerusalem, revealing to the weary Crusaders the city that had been their distant dream now conquered. Standing amidst sacred ruins and human wreckage, they felt a heady mix of relief and euphoria, their hearts pounding with the ecstasy of divine validation. This city, etched into their minds above all else, seemed a prize won through the tribulations of faith, conflict, and sacrifice. A vision realized after years of deprivation and struggle. Yet beneath the veneer of triumph, unspoken questions weighed heavily on their minds. At what cost had this victory come? The blood of innocents stained the holy streets, creating a narrative not just of victory, but one entwined with horror. Chroniclers of the time tasked with recording these monumental events twisted their pens thoughtfully on parchment. Their tales became tinged with both awe at the military achievement and shame at its bloody consequence. This victory, while glorious, asked for reflection on what had been sacrificed, the moral high ground, and the purity of their righteous cause. In the aftermath, Jerusalem was a city divided, caught between its shattered past and the potential promised by the Crusaders' new rule. They were not only conquerors, but now governors tasked with imposing order over a landscape scarred by violence. Their mission was to forge a new identity atop ruins, a city reflecting Christendom's ideals amidst the myriad cultures they had subdued. Yet the echoes of conquest lingered, the cries of those who perished reminding them of the permanent stain on their accomplishment. Jerusalem, now holding a fragile beauty, was shadowed by the ethical quandaries it represented. Chroniclers were faced with a task monumental in its complexity. They sought truth amidst chaos, capturing in script both the fervor of triumph and the grim reality witnessed at the hands and swords of the Crusaders. Some offered lavish praise for these divinely ordained victories, while others penned entries lined with moral conflict. Their calligraphy etching scenes of glory and shame intertwine. These documents remain a window into a period of profound reckoning, painting a picture of conquest as seen through many lenses, triumph cloaked in the aftermath of despair. In this strange silence post-victory, the warriors of Christendom confronted a new and unprecedented moral quandary. As soldiers of divine mission, the violence they engaged in was justified as sacred duty. Yet the conflict between sanctity and atrocity gnawed at their spirits, sparking debates among knights and bishops alike. Their souls wrestled with the brutal realities of siege, starvation, and death encountered on this holy quest. This reflection forged a narrative where glorious holy war was a venture paid in more than blood. It had even perhaps cost them their immortal souls. Priests and clerics found themselves central in this spiritual turmoil. They were the shepherds of faith thrust into reconciling the righteousness of divine mission with the horrors of their crusader flock's deeds. They guided warriors grappling with spiritual scars deeper than any sword wound, offering penance and restoration through new rituals. Jerusalem in these months became a crucible for spiritual reflection, the start of a path toward reconciliation and realignment of divine intent amidst chaos. Yet the underlying struggle was not easily resolved, reflective of larger tensions within medieval Christendom's ethos and the ongoing spiritual wrestle of its people. Jerusalem stood as more than a prize of conquest. It was at a crossroads of cultures and histories, revealing the Crusaders' place in this ancient tapestry. They attempted to overlay their Western Christian structure on an Eastern city, sparking tentative exchanges between coexisting faiths. Tensions simmered as Western governance clashed with the city's inherent pluralism. Here traditions met with a cautious embrace, creating an uneasy amalgamation mirrored in the clamor of its streets. As the conquerors were drawn into the city's vivid complexity, the occupation unfolded as a discourse beyond mere control, engaging directly with the living faith the Crusaders now lorded over. Christian triumph resonated midday with the peal of church bells. Yet the haunting calls to prayer from nearby minarets echoed still. The backdrop of Jewish, Christian, and Muslim interactions introduced a theological realism, reshaping their spiritual dimensions, as coexistence and rule demanded more than what conquest permitted. These layered interactions redefined Jerusalem's religious landscape as tensions and rituals entwined in tangible ways. Victory in Jerusalem, heralded by the Crusaders as divine favor, concealed a paradox beneath its joyous veneer. How could divine preference align with the shadow of bloodshed? This paradox weighed heavily on their collective consciousness. Triumph, while evidence of divine support, was fraught with existential dread. The realization that spiritual victory carried an inescapable moral cost. This insight cast a shadow over their return journey, urging Crusader and chronicler alike into introspection about their holy mission's complex nature and the harsh truths it unfolded. In the years following the initial fervor of conquest, the fragility of newfound dominance became apparent. Maintaining authority required unyielding vigilance against the ever-present threats pressing at Jerusalem's fragile borders. The Crusaders learned the harsh balance of diplomacy and military readiness, continuing their story not in triumphant return, but in constant defense and negotiation. This victory was bittersweet, grasped through a tenuous grip and demanding ceaseless effort to sustain in a landscape ever on the cusp of change. Their legacy in Jerusalem, though undeniable, is inherently shadowed and imprint carried through generations. The aura of divine mission is interwoven with a tale of human consequence, preserved as a lesson of ambition, enmeshed with the contradictions of fallible humanity. Their story remains part of the complex memory of fireside tales, pulpits of veneration, and silent monastic reflections, a dual narrative of courage and contradiction, etched into the heraldry and fabric of history. The Crusaders' conquest of Jerusalem stands as a parable of ambition fiercely enduring. After the Crusaders seized Jerusalem amidst furious battles and haunting losses, they gazed over the ghostly remains of their conquest. The charred ruins spoke of their bloody victory. Yet this was but the beginning of another ordeal, the birth of a kingdom. King Baldwin. I took the throne of this nascent state, a land taken by sword and zeal, now needing governance among the smoldering remains. With a weighty crown and a kingdom enveloped by uncertainty, Baldwin embarked on a reign challenging from its inception. Allies and foes circled the kingdom like wolves threatening the frail peace he hoped to nurture. The echoes of swords clashing had barely faded when the tension of ruling gnawed at the Crusaders. British, French, and other European customs clashed with local traditions, crafting an atmosphere thick with suspicion and discontent. Diversity in faith, Muslim, Jewish, and Eastern Christian communities intertwined with suspicion added to the complexity. The unyielding look of ancient streets now pulsed with quiet resentment, a murmur of hostility barely suppressed under the facade of uneasy peace. The kingdom faced threats not just from without, but within as well. The Crusaders, once a unified force, now had to negotiate alliances and manage the precarious durability of their reign. Blending European feudal customs onto foreign soil tested their political resolve. Land was subdivided among trusted lords, echoing the feudal systems of their homelands. Crusader lords became both rulers and ambassadors, acting with a diplomacy as intricate as it was necessary. Beneath their courts, the political landscape was like shifting sands requiring wary negotiation and cautious balancing between coercion and compromise. Wealth became another crucial tether in this tumultuous survival. Jerusalem transformed into a bustling trade center, a crossroads of cultures and commerce. Silks and spices wafted through the market, mingling with a clamor of differing tongues. Caravans laden with Eastern wonders navigated treacherous routes guarded by warriors with swords ready. Yet trade, while promising prosperity, presented its own hazards. The riches attracted bandits like moths to aflame each passing caravan, a tantalizing promise of golden gain. Amidst these endeavors, the delicate interplay of faith and power emerged. While churches rose again and pilgrimage paths bustled with devotees, religion served as both a rallying point and a political chess piece. The Crusade's spiritual mission, once clear and singular, splintered into political machinations and theological debates. The Holy Quest was less a singular journey now, more a tapestry with threads of faith intertwining with the desires of power and influence. This one-time invincible zeal now frayed under the constant pull of earthly concerns. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, celebrated in distant European courts as a divine achievement, weighed heavily upon its supporters. Maintaining this frontier of faith and politics was a staggering demand on resources. The exuberance of initial victories gradually paled against the ongoing costs. Jerusalem's survival was intricately tied to European goodwill and funds, a tightrope walk across the abyss of political and economic strain. At its core, the kingdom required a tenuous coexistence of diverse faiths, an uneasy mosaic of Christians, each vying for spiritual dominance, mirrored by outside pressures from Islamic and Jewish quarters. Crusader rulers, balancing on the edge of cultural clifftops, proffered religious dialogue with hands still echoing of conflict. Yet peace negotiated in fleeting whispers teetered before the reality of diverging beliefs, seldom rooted deep enough to quell underlying discord. Governance straddled the chasm of martial prowess and burgeoning bureaucracy. War-hardened knights crafted alliances with pen and heralds. The challenge lay in fixing the ephemeral chaos of crusade into ordered rule, administered by decree and missive on parchment, as fragile as the kingdom's peace. Bureaucracy, with its dogged persistence, contended against the shifting tides, documenting alliances and rulings destined to struggle against the breezes of change. This precarious kingdom finds its twilight, nestled in dissonance. The grand dreams of conquering knights transforming lives a world away now faced unapologetic reality. Wearing time's relentless erosion, the struggles of holding power became increasingly perilous. The Holy Land, steeped in its ancient gravitas, unraveled ambitions into the humbling finitude of its European rulers. Victories were eclipsed by the daunting expectations looming beyond the horizon. By the late 12th century, the kingdom's days waned, poised to imprint lessons onto history's relentless weave, waiting for the curtain to rise anew before destiny's next performers. In the aftermath of Jerusalem's fall, the Crusaders stood amidst a city reeking with the stench of both victory and devastation. Its silent, blood-soaked streets bore witness to humanity's dual capacity for divine devotion and unspeakable cruelty. Chroniclers, quivering as they dipped their quills, captured this uneasy stillness, a testament to the fine line between triumph and tragedy. Draped in Christian banners, the city wore its new colors, awkwardly, barely concealing the moral cost of conquest. Although Jerusalem was won, the Crusaders left fragments of their humanity among the rubble, a victory forever shadowed by their methods. Physical wounds from battles may have begun to heal, but the psychological scars spread like a silent plague, casting long shadows over Europe with tales of divine wrath and earthly conquest. These stories, embellished with myth and carried by returning crusaders, seeped into European consciousness, perpetuating cycles of religious conflict and cultural tension. In Jerusalem's crumbling walls, roots of enmity took hold, reaching across time and space to entangle future generations' hearts and minds. The First Crusade didn't just reshape the physical landscape, it rooted seeds of enduring hostility. The aggressive violence inflicted upon Muslims and Jews forged a legacy of mistrust and animosity that stretched far across continents. To those displaced and brutalized in the name of faith, Jerusalem was a symbol of Christian hegemony and a tangible grievance. Over time, the stories of these crusader victories spawned rhetoric that echoed through lands, stirring new waves of jihad aimed at repelling those deemed as barbarous invaders. In pursuit of celestial justification, both sides intensified their resolve, ensuring the ripples of violence stirred by these conquests would neither be easily forgotten nor forgiven. As word of the Crusader triumphs reached European shores, a fresh wave of religious fervor swept the land, leading to new crusades in distant territories like the Baltics. Yet beneath the rallying cries smoldered resentment from those unassimilated into the Church's grand design. Northern pagan tribes and defiant knightly orders found themselves caught between the demands of papal authority and the preservation of their homelands. In this charged atmosphere, petty disputes simmered over into religious declarations where knighthood's formal ideals of duty and honor intertwined with worldly desires for land and prestige. In such settings, loyalties wavered, often blending the roles of defender and usurper. The cultural clash from these campaigns left indelible marks on civilizations meeting at the brink of war and peace. Crusaders encountered the rich tapestry of the Eastern world, becoming reluctant vessels for the spread of philosophy, science, and exotic spices. Back home, amidst the pillage and conquest, moments of unexpected exchange emerged. From medical wisdom to culinary delights, weaving themselves into the fabric of European culture. Yet these exchanges were marred by deep-seated prejudices, where both sides crafted narratives demonizing their adversaries, painting pictures that would leave a near-permanent blemish on intercultural relations. The cycle of retribution spiraled endlessly following the Crusades. For the Muslim world, this brutal intrusion became a rallying call, unifying various factions against the Western threat. Figures like Saladin emerged, blending military guile with diplomatic agility to reclaim lands and restore dignity. Each side's desire for dominance lit new fires of vengeance, trapping both in a perpetual struggle where victory was ambiguous and each loss compounded the shared pain. This relentless back and forth endured well past the Renaissance, carving the Crusades into a psychological battleground for souls claimed by faith. Economically, the Crusades ignited transformations across borders. The logistical demands of massive armies birthed new trade networks and financial systems. Cities like Venice and Genoa thrived, evolving into powerhouses of commerce and subtle political influence. As returning crusaders introduced exotic goods into European markets, the stage was set for unprecedented exploration and economic expansion. Although these opportunities bore their own burdens, straining local economies and reshaping traditional labor structures within Christendom, the initial unifying zeal of the Crusades gradually unraveled, sowing seeds of theological doubt and sparking reformist ideals. Heretical movements and internal religious divisions challenged the papacy's authority, questioning the moral righteousness of violence in God's name. Monarchs and burgeoning city-states seized this discontent, asserting religious autonomy under the guise of nationalism. The echoes of broken loyalty rippled across Europe, fragmenting medieval Christendom into warring factions, clinging to their own interpretations of piety. Militarily, the Crusades served as crucibles of innovation. As European forces adapted to the diverse tactics of their foes, they refined siege techniques and embraced combined arms strategies. Lessons transported back to Europe that shaped future conflicts. The architecture of warfare evolved amidst these engagements, with the construction of impregnable fortresses reflecting newfound strategies. When these insights returned to Europe, they fueled expansionist wars and revolutions, themselves echoes of the Crusades' grim legacy. Through time, the Crusades embedded themselves into the law, leaving marks on literature and folklore that enriched narratives for centuries. Tales of knights and exotic lands woven into epic poems captivated imaginations, their stories echoing across time. These legends fostered a common heritage while confronting medieval societies with reflections on valor and brutality. Eastern tales of resilience and redemption also found their way into Western hearts, fostering a subtle bridge across cultural and religious chasms. Ultimately, the triumph at Jerusalem was both a peak and a descent. Achieved at great moral cost, the victory revealed an empire forged from paradox, a Christian dominion marred by the sacrilege it incurred. As time wore on, the zest of triumph dulled into a sobering realization of the horrors committed. The legacy of the First Crusade is a stark reminder of the perils when faith is wielded like a sword. Yet within its echoes lies the potential for reflection, learning, and perhaps a path toward understanding that seeks to heal rather than divide. In the heart of the Holy City, where the cobblestones still whispered tales of prophets and kings, the Crusaders finally stood triumphant. The streets of Jerusalem bore witness to an extraordinary feat of determination, underpinned by a divine mandate that resonated with every step of a knight's armor. Pope Urban II's call had sent ripples through the fabric of time, and here at last they achieved their sacred charge. But beneath the outward glow of success lay a shadow, a cost that was as profound as it was unsettling. The blood that painted the streets of Jerusalem red symbolized not just victory, but a descent into brutality that reverberated across the conscience of Europe and beyond. This was no mere battle. It was an exploration into the depths of human zeal marred by savagery. While the Crusaders rejoiced, the magnitude of what they had wrought began to unfold, a cycle of religious strife that would ripple through centuries. In their quest for holy fulfillment, they left behind a torn tapestry of despair and discord. The Holy Land, now secured through their sacrifices, would soon become a fragile pawn on the grand chessboard of warring faiths. It was here in Jerusalem that the Crusaders' spiritual ambitions collided catastrophically with the harsh stone walls of reality. Passionate warriors seeking celestial reward found themselves grappling with the ugliness of their own actions, leaving behind memories stained with violence. Amidst the chaos of holy purpose torn asunder, fanaticism revealed its vivid cost. Chroniclers of the time with quills dipped in dark irony captured the grim reality as religious fervor spiraled into indiscriminate slaughter. Jerusalem, meant to be a beacon of faith, became a testament to an earthly horror enacted in the name of the divine. As one raised the cross in triumph, another scrolled the chilling narrative of streets flowing with blood. In their quest, the Crusaders not only forfeited countless lives, but also fractured their own souls, crossing the line of human compassion into a realm of moral ambivalence. The kingdom they forged was atop a bloody foundation, echoing with the cries of a populace caught in a holy storm. As survivors returned home, their stories echoed through the corridors of Europe. Tales tarnished with the scent of carnage and whispered doubts of righteousness. To some, they were heroes clad in the honor of victory. To others, they were little more than marauders cloaked in greed and brutality. Within the hallowed halls and bustling markets of medieval towns, whispers sparked doubt. What was this holy war? Did it strip away the veneer of pious journey to reveal the unrelenting barbarity beneath? Thus, Jerusalem became less a city of promise fulfilled and more a reflection of ideals betrayed, casting long shadows over the reputation Crusaders bore with them. In capturing the city, Crusaders found themselves caught in a precarious theater of geopolitics. The new rulers, more accustomed to wielding swords than quills, faced challenges beyond the brute force of conquest. Mercy would find no purchase in a land saturated with grievance and hostility. Despite wearing laurel crowns of victory, they lacked the skills of seasoned statesmen, mindful of territories besieged by their adversaries' burning eyes. They maneuvered through an intricate web of allegiances and shifting sands akin to marionettes in a performance where every step forward felt uncertain. Jerusalem, a kingdom born of war, now lay at the mercy of those unable to tame it with wisdom. The harsh realities of victory didn't stop at shattered lands or hollow glory. Those who survived the harrowing crusade returned different from how they left, wounded in both body and spirit. Back in Europe, these men struggled with shadows of their past battles, their souls marked by actions defended as holy. Redemption that had driven them onward now seemed as elusive as the desert mirages. Memories seared into their minds weighed them like chains, leaving entire communities to grapple with the echoes of their quests long after swords had been sheathed. Beyond flesh and bone, the financial void left by the Crusade also undermined Europe's prosperity. Levying taxes and pledging estates, they bled the continent dry to fund the open-ended war effort. When the dust settled, states and the church reeled under the debt, realizing the fiscal burden was tangled with their piety. The dream of holy intervention came at a cost far removed from the tale of glory they hoped to write. As Europe counted its coins, the true price of the Crusade emerged, a tale of economics pulled taut by zeal and desire. Wider still was the impact on interfaith relations. Hopeful cooperation between the East and West instead widened the rift, transforming alliance to enmity. A journey intended to unify Christendom instead fragmented it, leaving scars that ran beyond geography and into the realm of ideology. The ideal of unity beneath one banner of faith became impossible amid strained alliances and recriminations. As the smoke of centuries clears, what remains of the Crusades is a tapestry of bravery and moral complexity woven together. Knights and pilgrims returned with more questions than answers. Relics of blood and faith were displayed not only to celebrate heroics, but as a token of treacherous peace. In stories and symbols, the First Crusade emerged as a powerful reminder of the blurred line between pursuit of glory and folly. In the strife-torn narrative of the Crusades, as we recount these chapters of triumph, we must embrace their complex legacy, a mirror reflecting our noblest and darkest possibilities. History's dance of glory and horror spins ever onward, urging us to reflect on ambition, humanity, and the price of faith. If you found this glimpse into the past intriguing, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more tales from history's shadowy corners.